Hi everybody, I'm going to share some very, very important and serious information here. And these are not the time for casual dismissal of the facts and evidence, because we are a nation under attack. Now, prior to this general election being called, and immediately after Parliament had called it, I was consistently explaining on my Twitter and through a couple of videos that there is absolutely no way that we can have a general election held under authority and rule of a lawfully suspected as criminal government, and actually found to be criminal, found guilty of unlawfully trying to thwart democracy by unlawfully, illegally proroguing Parliament, and for the specific purpose of a hard Brexit, of instigating a hard Brexit, won on the strength of an entirely fraudulent criminal referendum, a Brexit that threatens to kill British people, that threatens to dump people into even worse austerity for the next 50 years. Okay? Destroy people's lives, their businesses, their jobs, scrapping of all our rights. And never mind that the majority of those rights we had before we entered the EU and were actually created in Britain, that the EU then adopted. Basically the final plan in Thatcher's dream, which was ultimately leaving the EU and thereby using that as a pretext for scrapping all of our rights. And for no other purpose than to protect the interests of the top 1%, their tax breaks and their tax havens, and also continue to avoid any scrutiny on all their fraudulent and fake businesses. As evidenced again by Gordon Bowden, for example, Finchley Road with its 250,000 businesses, all at a couple of addresses on Finchley Road. We're talking a very serious level of crime, and I'm living in a nation where people are being arrested, charged, prosecuted, imprisoned for crimes related to possession of a judged illegal but actually harmless plant, people subject to corporate rules at the DWP, where people are being literally thrown into destitution, having their income stopped because they were 5 minutes late to sign on, or they didn't turn up for an appointment. But for some reason we can all just casually accept that the rich and powerful are all above the law. So I'm going to play you this little video here. It's Carol Cadwaladre at this international committee that's been investigating fake news and the fraudulent activities, criminal activities around the referendum, the Brexit referendum. And what she says is very, very serious. Now, everything she said and the level of urgency and importance that she has applied here to the evidence is exactly what I shared in a video to the House of Lords, which I made immediately after Parliament had agreed to this GE on 12th of December. And I pleaded with the House of Lords, saying you cannot allow this to go through because we cannot trust the results. We cannot trust any election held under authority of a criminal government. And to my immense disturbance, it was very disturbing to find that a day later, the next day, that video titled An Appeal to the House of Lords had literally vanished from my YouTube. No notification off YouTube saying there'd been complaints or I'd broken some YouTube rules. Nothing. It just literally vanished. And, you know, I'm a very small fish in the alternative news network pond. I've got less than 1,000 subscribers. My videos rarely get more than 100 views. And yet, it was taken down. And, you know, that was very, very disturbing. That I was deemed such a threat. And that this government has such powers that, yes, they can just get onto my YouTube, just delete a video, entirely disappeared, no trace of it at all. The day after I'd posted it, actually on the House of Lords Twitter page, it had gone. And if you go through my videos, you'll see I made a video exposing that and making a complaint about it and reiterating what I'd stated in the previous video. So listen to what this lady has to say.
And the fact that they're not here today because Parliament was suspended 2 days ago in preparation for a general election is profoundly disquieting on many levels, because the UK DCMS committee has painstakingly detailed the risks to our elections, and yet the government called this election having done absolutely nothing to address them. It's failed to undertake any of the committee's recommendations, and it is a gross dereliction of its duty to protect the British public. Nobody can be in any doubt about the risks to our democracy which are posed by these Silicon Valley tech platforms. I've spent 3 years investigating these risks, and we now know many facts. We know that the Brexit vote was fraudulently and illegitimately conducted. We know that the tech platforms, particularly Facebook, facilitated multiple campaigns to break the law. We know that the authorities have entirely failed to hold these perpetrators to account. And we know that we are set in Britain to leave the European Union on the basis of this fraudulent and illegitimate vote. The failure to reckon with these crimes has led to a situation where the man who led one of these campaigns, Vote Leave, which carried out the single biggest electoral fraud in our country for more than a century, is now the Prime Minister. And the man who masterminded this scheme is his chief advisor. This is not a situation that should exist in any well-functioning democracy. Britain is now a warning to the rest of the world, because what happened in our country could happen in your country too. The vast unchecked power of the Silicon Valley technology companies represents a...
So there you have it. It's very serious. We're talking about crime and criminals, and a level of crime and criminals that is actually intolerable, and it is actually criminal to tolerate it. And already we are witnessing the ongoing crimes of a fully controlled media, a government-controlled media, largely, that is devoted to libelling, slandering, attacking Jeremy Corbyn. And this is just one example. This Jewish historian recalls when Jeremy Corbyn saved a Jewish cemetery from Margaret Hodges Council. This is from the Canary. British people, we need to start looking more at these kind of alternative news sites, like the Canary, for our information and news. Because what we have here is, anti-Semitic Jeremy Corbyn, as is repeatedly being called out by this lady, Margaret Hodge. It turns out that Margaret Hodge, who has smeared Jeremy Corbyn as an anti-Semite, was leader of Islington Council at the time that the council approved destroying the gravestones and digging up and reburying the bodies to build for profit properties. Jeremy Corbyn, he successfully, in 1987, successfully campaigned to stop property developers taking over that cemetery. I mean, you really couldn't make this stuff up, could you? So I'm just going to show you this thread here from Red Robin. Whilst the right-wing media and Tory detritus continually libel and smear Jeremy Corbyn and the UK Labour Party with accusations of endemic anti-Semitism, it's time to present the British people with actual facts, not smears with absolutely no proof to back them up. So here are the facts. Please feel free to use Google to check them for yourselves, rather than listen to the deliberately published propaganda deliberately aimed at Labour in order to damage and undermine our party as they have always done. In October 1936, Jeremy Corbyn's mother participated in the Battle of Cable Street in defence of British Jews after British fascists had staged an assault on the area. Corbyn was raised in a household passionately opposed to anti-Semitism in all its forms. On 23rd of April 1977, Corbyn organised a counter-demonstration to protect Wood Green from a neo-Nazi march through the district. The area had a significant Jewish population. On the 7th of November 1990, Corbyn signed a motion condemning the rise of anti-Semitism in the UK. In 2002, Corbyn tabled a motion in the House of Commons condemning an anti-Semitic attack on a London synagogue. On the 26th of November 2003, Jeremy Corbyn signed a parliamentary motion condemning terrorist attacks on 2 synagogues. In February 2009, Jeremy Corbyn signed a parliamentary motion condemning a fascist for establishing a website to host anti-Semitic materials. On the 24th of March 2009, Corbyn signed a parliamentary motion praising British Jews who resisted the Holocaust by risking their lives to save potential victims. 9 years ago, Corbyn signed a parliamentary motion praising Jewish News for its pioneering investigation into the spread of anti-Semitism on Facebook. On the 9th of February 2010, Corbyn signed a parliamentary motion calling for an investigation into Facebook and its failure to prevent the spread of anti-Semitic materials on its site. I mean, I'm going to leave you the thread. I'm going to leave you the link to this thread. Read through it. Read through it. And understand the level of lies and attack, the ongoing attack against democracy. A democracy cannot run on fake news and lies and libel and slander and smears. And from the kind of government that imposes austerity on its nation. And this is from 2013, and at the time I was very angry about this and very frustrated that none of the other mainstream news media has really picked up on it. But this is a government that's imposed such austerity on its population unnecessarily, by a policy, an economic policy, that has led to working families, nurses, even the disabled and sick, having to depend on food banks to stay alive. And the EU had a £2.5 billion fund of European aid to the most deprived to be used to help with the cost of running food banks. It meant £22 million for Britain to stock our food banks, and David Cameron said no. He refused it. He refused it. Now, at the time, I felt this was unlawful because as EU citizens, the people of Britain have a right to an entitlement, a lawful entitlement to benefit from aid from the EU when we're going through difficulties. Why did they do it? What kind of a government does that? Imposes austerity on its people to the extent that they're having to depend on food banks to survive, and then refuses their legal, lawful, righteous, rightful entitlement to aid from the EU. But instead of getting 22 million to stock our food banks, instead, the British public, themselves going through austerity, are expected to provide food from their weekly shop. Because this government has stated very recently that it has no duty to secure food supplies in a no-deal Brexit nor any other crisis. But the EU apparently feels it does have a duty to provide food during times of crisis, to the extent that they offered 22 million to, and I think that would have been per year, to stock British food banks. And Britain said no. How many people have suffered as a direct result of that? How many people, families, have gone hungry as a direct result, or actually had substandard food? This is, that itself is a crime. And yet Jeremy Corbyn is the one being compared to Stalin. And then we see, ironically, that no, actually, it's these who are colluding with Russia now. Russian oligarchs heavily involved in Brexit and have very strong financial interest in Brexit. We're talking about actually a global criminal cabal network of oligarchs, and even the Israeli Zionist Party, all with economic interests in Brexit, including Trump and his entourage of Bannon and Cambridge Analytica, you name it, that they're actually gambling against our sovereign currency and stand to gain billions the lower the pound drops. Imagine a falling pound at a time when wages are stagnant and prices would be rising with their no-deal Brexit, because the deal that is organised, it might as well be a no-deal Brexit. And they've decided to sit on this Russia report exposing the evidence of that crime. And then we've got our police watchdog saying that, oh no, we're going to shelve the inquiry into Boris Johnson's unlawful funding with this, lady here, Jennifer Arcuri. Criminal misconduct. So, the police watchdog has delayed its announcement on whether the PM should face an investigation until after the election. And meanwhile, a homeless ex-soldier, age 82, dies hours after being evicted from a squat. How does any 82-year-old person in Britain end up on the streets, homeless and destitute. How does that happen? How can it happen? And Jeremy Corbyn's the one person who is asking that question and seeks to address it fundamentally, immediately. And yet we're just witnessing attack after attack after attack after attack. And this is all part of fraudulent elections. Because people who are fed false information in a democracy, it's very serious. Because the people who are feeding us that false information are doing it specifically to persuade people to vote against their own best interests and their children's best interests. So, I'm repeating again. Boris Johnson must resign. He needs to step down. We need an interim government, and this general election needs to be suspended. Already, our recently privatised corporate postal service is winding its workforce up that much that they're threatening to strike again. Are they going to be striking around the time of the GE? How's that going to affect the postal vote? Expect all these kind of shenanigans to be happening. Even if Jeremy Corbyn wins, how do we know that still the Tory opposition may not still yet hold a fair portion of parliamentary seats on strength of all the fake news and the lies and the libel that they've been peddling through their control of the media? Because as the government, they have profound influence over the media, over the police, over the courts. We're talking about a government, as I say, that has been found guilty of abusing its power to thwart the process of democracy over such a serious issue as a Brexit that itself is the result of criminal and fraudulent referendum, and one that was run by the very people now sitting at number 10. Our children's future is on the line here. Our children's future is on the line. And, you know, I made my video because I'm fully aware of the levels of crime that this government is involved with. I'll leave the link to this again. Please read through it. Especially the section titled Further Evidence, Further Points of Evidence, Further Points of Concern. Because, you know, we are looking at crime after crime after crime after crime, each one leading to bigger crimes, even worse crimes. And finally, the crime of Brexit that threatens to break up our United Kingdom. It threatens our economy and even the very lives of British citizens, because we're talking about a government that isn't even prepared to provide food to people in times of crisis, but they are stocking up on body bags. We're talking about, as the government itself has stated, 50 years of austerity. And we're talking austerity on steroids. So, you know, they've already murdered 130,000 people by now with austerity, directly related to austerity, to the extent that the people who performed the investigation into that and came up with that figure, actually at the time 120,000 last year, accused the government of economic murder. Well, expect, 500,000 dead within the first 20 years of their Brexit? Or their continued austerity? We are talking about a very, very serious levels of crime. And as I say, it is actually criminal to ignore it. We cannot allow this general election to go through. It has to be suspended. It has to be. Because we have to draw the line somewhere and say, no, enough is enough now. Because we're talking about the future of our country. We're talking about our children's future here. We are effectively the last living line of defence. And, you know, Carol, she says everything. She expresses exact same concerns that I express to the House of Lords and in my videos about the validity of a general election being held under a criminal government. And also, as I explain here, she again reiterates exactly the same concern here, that what has happened in Britain represents a threat to every country in the world, and especially Europe. Because it is the 1%, it is the corporate 1% who have vested interests in avoiding paying taxes, protecting their tax havens, and avoiding scrutiny on their fraudulent money laundering businesses. And they will do whatever they can to get their way, and they're very powerful. And when they control a government, and that government is also got connections to other criminal governments, like, for example, Netanyahu himself being investigated for crimes related to financial fraud. Donald Trump, exactly the same. And abusing his powers to thwart democracy in America. And now the Russian involvement as well. And as Dominic Grieve rightly explains here, that no, lawfully, we have a lawful right to see this report now, not after an election. We have a lawful right. And, you know, this isn't the final straw that has broken the camel's back, because the camel has already had a ton of bricks thrown onto its back. And now this is another ton. According to the severity of the risks that we're facing. As I say, we're talking about tens of thousands of people's lives and livelihoods here. We're talking about our children's future and their children's future and even their children's children's future. We're talking about the very safety and security, even the life of our planet. Please, people, share the information. I'll leave you all the links of everything that I've shared here. Share the information. Write to your MP. Make a fuss out about this, because this is every bit as serious as when Boris Johnson prorogued Parliament and everybody was out there campaigning in every town, every city. We need this again. This general election must be suspended. Parliament needs to reconvene to discuss to discuss the evidence now on the table, lawfully and officially on the table. And as I say, it is a crime to ignore it.